Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AIM Summit webinar on food security, farming in the desert, and fishing on land. I'm your host, Zachary Sefaradi, CEO and founder of Dalma Capital and strategic partner of AIM Summit. We have audience members joining from over 35 different countries today, including institutional investors, family offices, high net worth individuals, and several leaders of the financial services industry. Thank you for joining us. Please feel free to submit your questions as they come throughout the session at any time. There's a Q&A dialogue at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom platform. If you're joining us after the fact on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel now. Go to aimsummit.com so you can participate in live sessions and participate in Q&A. It's great to introduce our partners for this webinar, which is Abu Dhabi Catalyst Partners. Abu Dhabi Catalyst Partners, or ADCP, is a joint venture between Mubadala Investment Company based in Abu Dhabi and Falcon Capital based in New York City. ADCP was established in April 2019 with committed capital of $1 billion. ADCP has a dual mandate to achieve financial returns while also contributing to the overall development of the Abu Dhabi global market. They seek to partner with top-tier investment firms and industry-leading businesses who would provide benefit to developing a meaningful and sustainable presence in the ADGM, which itself is a world-class platform for financial services and institutions. It's also great to introduce from the ADCP team, James Muntz, who is the COO and CFO of Abu Dhabi Catalyst Partners. James started his career with PwC auditing private equity and hedge funds whilst qualifying as a chartered accountant before moving to Merrill Lynch, or BAML, in 2007. James spent 11 years at BAML building out the award-winning Merrill Lynch Investment Solutions, or MLIS, UCITS platform that partnered with top-tier investment managers to provide European distribution and infrastructure. MLIS at its peak had assets of $6.5 billion, and James served both as COO and CEO. Prior to joining Abu Dhabi Catalyst Partners, James was the COO of the Australian multi-boutique business Fidante Partners with assets of $65 billion across 14 boutique partners. Also introducing in this session, Stefan Farouz. Stefan has 28 years investment experience. Prior to founding ADEF Asset Management, he was the chairman of alternatives for Deutsche Asset and Wealth Management, global head of alternatives and fund solutions, and was on several executive committees for Deutsche Asset Alternative Wealth Management and Private Bank. Stefan's team managed over 200 professionals globally and was directly responsible for 50 billion of assets. Stefan received multiple awards, including the Risk Magazine Hedge Fund Derivatives House of the Year for 6 consecutive years, and various other UCITS platform and product awards. Earlier on, he was a partner of Paradigm Global Advisors, and he worked at many financial institutions, including Societe Generale, BNP, Commerzbank, Smith Barney, and Payne Webber. He holds a BSBA degree in finance from San Diego State University. Finally, also introducing Daniel Page. Dan Page is the head of asset management advisory with KPMG Ireland. Dan is a senior advisory professional with over 20 years of capital markets experience and has provided a wide range of services to various clients, including international banks, asset managers, single and multifamily offices, and a broad variety of funds. His previous roles include Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, and he was managing director of Swiss-based Bedrock Real-Time, part of the Swiss asset management group Bedrock. His remit at KPMG focuses on the development of the advisory practice, which serves to manage and invest in hedge funds and alternative investments. He also works in the transactional capacity with corporate finance, where he's a deal maker for financial services. It's my pleasure again to be hosting such a great panel and distinguished members of this panel as we're discussing what has become a very interesting topic, particularly in 2020, which is again discussing the food security, farming in the desert, fishing on land. We're going to start with an introduction with James Muntz, who's going to be talking to us about the agricultural revolution. James, if you could tell us, when was the first time that you began to look at agricultural investments, and how has that carried through to your time at Catalyst Partners?
Thanks, Zach, and thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for the introduction as well. I was very keen and pleased to hear that I have more AUM than Stefan. I'm sure he'll take umbrage with that later, but it felt good to hear it. So as you mentioned, I've been in the alternative space now for approaching 20 years. the majority of that time in more public market strategies and more hedge funds. But I'd say about 7 or 8 years ago, we started to see this investment theme of agritech, the Internet of Things, all playing a part in different agricultural revolutions, and really felt like a sea change of what was going on in the industry, and investment opportunities that were definitely out of the ordinary and warranted time looking at them. 6, 7 years ago, we were looking at themes in the US, predominantly looking at West Coast food production, how that was moving to the East Coast where the demand and the population was, and investment opportunities around smart cities, the use of buildings, the use of solar and energy sources within cities, and how really investment firms could play that theme in a scalable way. And it's really been an interesting 6 or 7 years as the technology has caught up, as the technology is enabling real scale in these areas now. And it was really when we moved to Abu Dhabi a couple of years ago, and we really saw the innovation that was going on here, especially in the agri scene, that really made us take a bit more notice. And I would say in the last 12 months, we've probably seen on average 1 a week, 1 every 2 weeks of investment managers looking at different themes in the agri space, linking that in with what's happened this year with coronavirus and food security. And it's just become a huge area of focus, not just for us, but across the whole investment landscape, it feels like. So it's been an interesting journey, and one we're looking forward to spending more time on in the future.
With a variety of different managers across asset classes, and now you're seeing more asset managers investing in specialty asset classes with regards to agriculture. Can you share with us what exactly you see happening from your perspective?
Yeah, happily. The world changed for us in food security terms in 2013. You know, the UK horse meat scandal changed, was really the catalyst, pun deliberately intended, for the flow that change that we've seen inside our asset managers and our clients. Now, it really triggered a slightly different lens on food security, not just surety of supply, if that's your view on the world, but surety of provenance. Surety of provenance for ethical, religious, and brand value reasons. And that's driven a real waterfall of flow change for us inside the investment committees which we support. And it's really started to skew in the last 2 years to the use of technology and scientific application to prove the supply chain, you know, the surety of your food within that. And that lens has been on value. As we've seen a cycle move through some of the funds that have put capital to work, the value here has been driven by surety and provenance, not by supply. And that's really been the focus of our universe. How can we ensure what product we are investing in retains its brand value? Where is the Daily Mail risk, so to speak, within that? That is going to be in the security of that supply chain, and we need to find a scientific way to prove that. And it's been some really interesting observation points that prove that is pretty difficult on a global scale. And and it's expected. The food industry thinks it costs circa $50 billion a year food fraud. And it's a huge number, and it's a huge thing to be concerned of when you're an asset manager putting cash to work in a portfolio company, or more so if you're in the seat of an LP putting cash to work inside a GP that's putting cash to work in portfolio companies. So that's where we see the biggest risk, and it's the key focus for our clients for certain. But big sea change in the last 7 years, and specifically in the last 18 months.
Stefan, when you see someone like yourself running having previously run a $50 billion alternative investment platform, and then moving into the aquaculture industry, it makes you realize that something must be going on here, and something quite interesting. Can you tell us, how did you make the transition from finance to aquaculture? And can you tell us a bit more about the Pure Salmon story?
Sure. Well, again, Zach, thank you very much for inviting us. Let me share something on the screen, and it will give you a view where in reality finance and agriculture is very linked to each other, because you need money to invest in that space. So when I left in 2016 the board of asset and wealth management. I was running at the time private equity, hedge funds, retirement solutions. What was shocking to me is everybody was talking about alternative, but we saw in reality that everything was correlated in a way, except few things. And those few things were food. Why? Because every day we're seeing during our crisis today, you need to eat every day, you need to drink every day. And if you look on the bottom left, I put the price of salmon, and we saw that during 2008, price of salmon were going up, up, and up. There was no crisis in that scale. So for me, when I left the board, I said, okay, what can I do which is going to be sustainable, scalable, and profitable? And in reality, food was the answer for our client base and for ourselves. We wanted to go to an industry that were able to cope the amount of money that we'll be able to invest into an industry what was need to a paradigm shift. This industry for us was definitely the fish industry, and more specifically, the salmon industry. I put here on the top left a chart showing the changes of in the late 80s of the cages industry coming into play. This has completely changed the amount of salmon that were able to be farmed and eaten by the people. The amount of wild salmon has been stable since the 90s, but the growth of consumptions that happened due to the sushi mania and others were be able to be done by the cages. Today, cages represent 77% of the consumptions of salmon. The supply of salmon is done by cages, 77%. This industry today are reaching a limit. There is less license. There is problems with algae blooms. There's many different issues where if you want it to be global, and as Daniel said, people want to eat something which is locally grown. It is very important for food security for countries, but it's also important for people to understand that we need to protect our planet. So I saw that there was a problem in that technology, and the growth that we've seen of over 3.5 million tons of salmon needed a change, and that change was inland fish farming. When I came, inland fish farming was a very small part of the industry. The salmon production was today and still today only less than 1% of our consumptions of protein in the world. And what I found a technology provider that was small, that had a technology for other fish, tilapia, trout, but not salmon. I looked at the market and I said, okay, this is the vision. I bought 50% of it with my own money. I put 50% of the research and development that they had in Poland. We switched from tilapia to salmon. And I took a vision. And my vision was, if that technology is able to be scalable, we will have something that will answer to our client base and a good answer for the planet. We've been very successful. So we started in 2016. This was our first acquisitions. When I've seen that the technology was working, I'm going to go back to the previous slide. Sorry. I've seen two things. I've seen that one, the salmon was able to be grown inland. It was cheaper than the cages. So here, the relationship with finance, because at the end of the story, you can have the best idea, but if it doesn't work on the bottom line, it doesn't work. And you have on the bottom right a page from the Itoshu test team that has signed a contract with me. And every single month, we've been sending them our salmon to be tested. So it is not an open heart surgery. It is just the test of my salmon that being given. So yes, there is a transition, but the transition is exactly the same thing that we do in finance and in asset management. One, a concept that works. So we bought that first concept. We have now fish that are grown up to 7 kilos. The taste of our fish is fantastic. And we looked, because we want to do something which is completely vertically integrated, into a second acquisition that we have made this year, which is a processing facility in France, doing smoked salmon in different shape or form. Again, having the same vision, training centers for all our global vision, which today we want to do 260,000 tons, and was coming to train our team, coming to explain that we could be completely vertically integrated, and coming to my vision, which is to be global, local. So having different facility everywhere in the world. And I'm going to show you the different product that we today have tested. We had a test at Phuket in Abu Dhabi 3 days ago, and the chef was very, very pleased. And today we are selling our salmon in Auchan, Leclerc, and Carrefour in France. So from finance to a real reality, And that reality is having finished product. Good.
So, okay, so expanding on that topic, I'd like to talk a little bit about food security as a relevant topic and how this has become more and more important of a topic since COVID-19. Dan, with all investment decisions, the base premise is always financial returns, but recently non-financial factors have become more and more important as part of the agenda. UN sustainability goals, the ESG factors, and recently food security is seeming to come onto the agenda. When has this changed and how has this developed?
When the genesis of the change is harder to point out, right? But certainly the last 18 to 24 months, the ESG agenda has evolved from concept or niche to fully ingrained in every business that we support, and rightly so. There's still a huge spread of what that means to asset managers, how data is gathered, and quite frankly, how the E, the S, and G are even classified. But it is very front and center today in every single conversation we have. Food security couldn't tick more of those boxes, could it? And certainly when overlaid into a COVID-19 world, even more so. You have the rise of consciousness around environmental impact. You have a direct line into where your products are sourced from, how sustainable they are, and what that means for you as a conscious choice. And there are a lot of data on, a lot of data of real success stories in this. Meat alternatives are another good example, right? And that is also very true in what it means for where your food has come from. There was some interesting breaking news over the weekend in New Zealand that I'm sure everybody has seen. That really brought these things together: food surety, where it came from, and COVID-19, meat that was claimed to be from somewhere, not being from somewhere, and coming out of somewhere that was potentially an origin source of COVID-19. Not ideal for the value of anyone in that supply chain, and that brings it all back to value, doesn't it? Right, exactly that, for value. If you can take an ESG factor, you've only got to look at the rhetoric from the I thinks of this world. You are likely to perform better. You are certainly likely to attract better quality capital, and you're likely to be more deployable inside a portfolio. And if you have technical surety as well, you're going to have greater impact, or at least be able to convert your rhetoric into measurable greater impact. And I think that makes food security the most relevant portfolio company component with an ESG lens. It really, really does, because it encompasses everything that is of the moment today: surety, sustainability, and there's a lot of value to be had. And there's a lot of application of science and technology to prove the value. So if we we're all alternatives guys, if we put those hats on and look at this through that lens, and Stefan's done that, with a greater level of conviction than anyone I've ever met, then it is easy to see how the application of technology and good banking skill, insurance, and the surety of the portfolio companies is going to pick out the value, and that will create wonderful opportunities for the Jameses of this world of allocators. That's how I see it.
So speaking of James as an allocator, so James, I mean, given what you guys are putting into this space, clearly food security is of some importance to ADGM and to Abu Dhabi at large, and to Catalyst Partners itself, given who your investors and shareholders are. Why is this important? How is this important to you and to Abu Dhabi as a whole?
Yeah, and we've been grappling with, was this important pre-COVID? And I think it was, but we were talking about it in different ways. So as Catalyst Partners, our role is to partner with innovative, forward-thinking businesses who want to set up a sustainable presence in the ADGM. The ADGM is very focused on sustainable finance, and we've got to be relevant to what they want to be focused on and what the industry wants to be focused on. And so as a natural adjunct to that, we find ourselves looking at businesses that are ESG friendly, that are sustainable, and not just sustainable in terms of an ESG perspective, but sustainable in terms of a long-term growth perspective. And so as we went into the beginning of this year, I don't think food security was at the top of our agenda, but we need to be relevant to our mandate, and that's to grow the ADGM with innovative, forward-thinking companies. And there's no more innovative, forward-thinking companies at the moment in the agritech space. So that really made it relevant to us to look at firms in this space And that led us to meeting Pure Salmon and Stefan and building the relationship we have now. And so it's important. It's an important part for us to play a role in. We're a key catalyst for the ADGM. You look at what ADQ have done with their recent announced acquisition of Louis Dreyfus. You hear about the newspapers every day, food security for the region and food security for the UAE specifically. And it becomes relevant for us as an investor. So it's not something that we specifically look out and say we should be focusing on, but you look at what's relevant for you and for your shareholders and your stakeholders, and you lend yourself very, very naturally to sustainable food security investments. And we look forward to looking at more opportunities as the year and the 2021 goes on.
And of course, mate, you've got a really natural axe here as well, haven't you, with food security? To have greater food security from the lens I talked about at the start, you need vertically integrated supply chains. Vertically integrated supply chains, much greater EBITDA margin, you would hope, and probably a greater turn on the value of those companies, greater opportunity as both a manager and an investor. And those dynamics meet up incredibly elegantly in food security, where they don't pretty much anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last bit from our point of view is it's real businesses. We like the fact that there's asset management, finance management, fund management, operating companies, food security, things going on in the region, and it has multifaceted impacts for us as an impact investor, I suppose.
Well, I want to come back to food security in the UAE specifically, but before that, actually, Stefan, when you were setting up Pure Salmon, was food security at the top of the agenda? Was that part of the strategy, or were you just responding to, you highlighted the, supply and demand mismatches, the trends that were happening in the market, the commercial aspects. 4 years later, food security certainly is at the top of the agenda, but was that part of the grand plan? Was this, being incredibly forward thinking, or was it more of addressing a commercial gap in the market?
Well, first of all, yes, it has always been on top of the agenda. And we can see today because on the board of my company, we have 3 sovereigns. So the vision for me was to answer something which is very important, which was that gap that already exists. So why food security and supply and demand are very important. If you look at on the right side of the screen, you see the population going up and up. And already by 2030, there will be 33 million ton deficit of fish in the market, 33 million ton. So it is a supply and demand issue, but it's a food security issue. Why? Because as the population is getting richer and richer, people are demanding more protein. The world cannot cope of eating the same protein that we're eating today. Why is that? Because to have a kilo of meat, you need 6 to 10 kilo of feed to have that 1 kilo of meat. 2.7 to 5 for pigs and chicken, 1.7 to 2. The more efficient is fish. It's between 1.2 and 1.5, and for salmon is 1.2. So for me, when I came into 2016, I saw that vision. My vision was we have a problem in the world, which is food. We have a problem that countries protect themselves by buying, I would say, having an army, but one kind of army is eat. You need to eat every single day. Some countries, definitely like China, have a bigger problem. And this was definitely on top of my agenda, and supply and demand and food security is in the fish industry is the same. We have that gap, we need to come up with that gap and answering that gap. The way we answer that gap is, we know, and I give a little bit of an issue of the cages here. Cages will not go away, but some countries already have decided to ban it. Some countries like Denmark say we are limiting the growth. Some countries are telling them to just take out the cages within a few years. So there is a limit of that industry that today, again, provide in the salmon industry 77% of our supply. It cannot stay like this. We have problem of sea lice. We have problem of license. We have problem of the water getting hot. And this is a huge problem for that industry. And that's why it came into my mind. And that's why I moved knowing that I was going to be able to deploy over time over $3 billion in that industry. $3 billion.
So when people think of the United Arab Emirates, they think of a country that is an exporter of oil and an importer of pretty much everything else, especially food. But that has been changing, and the UAE has actually set a goal of becoming a net exporter of food. I mean, James, is that a realistic goal? Can the UAE actually become a net exporter of food to other countries?
Yes. I mean, clearly it has to be a long-term target. And I think a 30-year target is what they've put around this. But I think for those of us that are in the region at the moment, what the UAE have achieved in the last 30 years across multiple business lines, you wouldn't put it past them to achieve this one in food. I think in my view, you can put it into three components. The countries which are already net food exporters, they broadly fall into two categories, right? You've got countries that have got the land to do it, and you've got countries that don't have the land to do it, but have got the technology to do it, like the Netherlands as an example. And the UAE is clearly taking that technology lead. It does have lots of land. It's the topography that's the problem. But the technology is here and the technology is right, and it's taking the right approach to that. Secondly, timing. The technological advances in energy consumption, generation, the storage, and the usage of energy are all focused on food production at the moment. And the timing for applying that into hostile regions makes sense. And you can't just do leafy greens and tomatoes. You're now investing in R&D around, as Dan mentioned, meat substitutes, around other alternatives for sweeteners. And all of that is lending itself at the right time and the right technological evolution alongside the agricultural revolution. But lastly, I'd say there's a difference between being a net food exporter and being self-sufficient. And we talk about food security and self-sufficiency. They're two different things. The UAE is almost certainly likely to import some types of foods for preferences, for cost reasons. But if you can achieve in 5-10 areas big growth like the Netherlands have done, and then you look at a time frame that's 30 years and you look what's happened over the last 30 years, then absolutely it's realistic that it can be achieved.
So, Stefan, how is seafood going to contribute to this goal? Is that going to be a big component?
What I can tell you is in 2.5 years from now, the UAE will be a net exporter of salmon. Today, except a very small farm in Dubai, all the salmon are being imported in all the GCC. What we're going to do today is we're going to build a facility just like this one. So this is the plan of our facility in Japan, France, and the US. We're going to build that facility in Abu Dhabi. For your information, we have moved. Pure Salmon was a Singaporean company, and we have moved our headquarters today in LDG. So for us, Abu Dhabi is a very important place for our business. The headquarters of my business will be here. We have today over 11 people in Abu Dhabi. We will hire more than 300 people in Abu Dhabi for our plant. And we are going to export from Abu Dhabi, not only for the GCC, but from all the Middle East. So if you look at the market here, today, if you look between UAE, GCC, Israel, Egypt, Turkey, and Jordan, we're talking about 73,000 tons of consumption of salmon. Our vision is to do 10 to 20,000 tons in Abu Dhabi. To export, today you have already, due to the peace agreement, you have vegetables and fruit that are coming today from Israel. On the truck back, we will bring salmon to Israel. Israel do not have any facility of this magnitude in salmon, and we will export our salmon to Israel, to Turkey, to Jordan, to North Africa. We are thinking also putting a frozen fish for the country that do not have the capacity to buy fresh food. And this is again something that we're looking for Abu Dhabi. The advantage of Abu Dhabi is first you have the sea, which means you have salt water, and you do have energy. So for us, in the end, the amount of constructions and construction company that we have in Abu Dhabi and the GC is huge. So you are able to build a facility of that magnitude in Abu Dhabi. So Abu Dhabi will be in 3.5 years a net exporter of salmon. This is a style of product that we will do in Abu Dhabi. So again, from head-on gutted, so full fish to fresh fillet to smoke. So we'll have a full integrated vertical integration business in Abu Dhabi, and it will go up to the pet treats. Just to, as Daniel stated before, during pet treat this year has overperformed the S&P by 40%. So everything that goes with food is today not only sustainable, but is also very profitable. So for the UAE, our facility is a game changer in terms of food export.
So
I agree with that.
I'd like to expand on that. You said it's not only sustainable, but it is profitable. So Dan, I mean, looking at our audience, we have mostly investors in this audience. And at the end of the day, they like to know how to deploy capital, how to make money. Now, agriculture is historically known as not the highest return asset class. How can investors look to play and position themselves around this theme? And do you see the strong returns that Stefan is referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with what Stefan said anymore. Think of the levers, the value levers here. The carbon value lever is incredibly important for value. Lowest carbon imprint per gram of protein, as I understand it, all right, at least in common usage sources of protein. It's also very high margin. The carbon imprint piece is very, very important when you look at the investment universe and the amount of pledges to be carbon neutral, how the carbon market is evolving as well, something we're quite heavily involved in. That is an important driver of value. ESG is a modern important driver of value. We've touched on that a little bit already. So I've got both two bits of those bits covered, right? Inside a salmon investment directly. I can be self-sufficient and I can have growth with space and power, driving that inside the UAE as an investment proposition to get an investment proposition, salmon particularly, is significantly higher margin than its peers also, and the growth curve or trajectory is pretty significant, and it's been steep historically, very steep historically with the sushi boom, I suppose. But when you look at traditional factors, classical factors of growth in consumption, and then you overlay that with energy usage for production and the ESG components of sustainability, I think there are going to be many opportunities that are similar to Stefan's, but it ticks every single box for me in how you can expect to have wonderful growth, good EBITDA margin, strong returns. And the timing, as James mentioned, is fabulous, isn't it? Because we are really at the start of a lot of these curves and how investor mentality is changing. So to be inside the UAE, producing today, driving to be such a net exporter so quickly, which surprised me, that's going to look wonderful on a compounded return basis, I would imagine, and the rest of that supply chain also around that. And you've got one other factor here that I think is incredibly important to mention in terms of looking at the value of the value chain, the security part, that is surety of production. Farmed salmon here, as I understand this also, you can, with the right scientific application or the right kite mark, like an Oritane kite mark, even place the tank that the fish was produced in. And that's incredible for that too. So you apply that as a banker's mentality into EBITDA turn, wonderful economics. Don't think we'd be short opportunity.
And I think, if I may add, Daniel, the carbon footprint here, today, salmon are being transported by plane. And it's one, costly. It's not good for the carbon footprint, but it's also very costly. So for a fish to arrive from Norway to Abu Dhabi, it's around $2 per kilo. Our cost of production is very close to that. So there is no brainer. So the competition here has an issue, and that's why it is the technology to invest in.
So if you apply that theme then to growth, then as you add a production facility in region, you are answering the local sustainability problem too. So as you add production facilities, you are answering the sourcing it locally, and you're reducing the carbon footprint. I put my reformed banker's hat on. I love that from a value perspective, and that answers your question, Zachary, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about localization. We're thinking about the impact that that has on supply chains. Again, what does this mean for global cooperation and for is this part of a kind of deglobalization trend? Stefan, also, I'd like to ask you, with countries striving for food security, self-reliance, obviously, these kind of investments must be quite capital intensive. What does this mean for global cooperation? What's the potential impact for poorer countries?
So let me answer on the vision of being global and after looking at poor country. So this is our vision. The equity we like to spend is 2.1 billion. So let's say on the debt side will be the same, so over $4 billion of investments. What we have done so far is Japan, Poland, France, and the US. The next one will be Abu Dhabi and Southeast Asia in Brunei. The poor country, we just won an award in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE for the Lesotho plant. So Lesotho is one of it's 1.3 million inhabitants, is 30% of the population has AIDS. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. But they have two things for them. They have amazing water and they produce all their electricity with green energy. So when I looked at this country, I said, okay, let's do a plant in Lesotho. They have the two things that I need. 2 cents per kilowatt for electricity, done green. Amazing water because it's a country with mountain and you can even snow in Lesotho. Very few people know that. And from Lesotho, we will definitely send protein and good protein to all the south of Africa. We can even go through shipping, and as you know, shipping is quite cheap now on frozen, up to North Africa. So this is our vision for a country that cannot afford a fresh food, which today you can imagine sending a salmon from Norway to South Africa and Lesotho is literally extremely expensive on fresh, and everything goes to frozen. The globalization, as you can see, my next huge country in which we're launching in January is 5 facilities in China. We are talking directly, to be quite honest, with governmental bodies. For China, their food security program is at the essence. And again, that's why you come with a finance background, because you are able to negotiate at the highest level of the government, where you can get grants, where you're getting subsidies, where today you are received as something which is essential for the country. For China, food is essential. From China, from Lesotho, from Abu Dhabi, from Southeast Asia, from Southeast Asia, we will do Indonesia. We will bring that protein which is missing from being local but global. So this is our vision, doing 260,000 tons, which means the number 2 producer of salmon in the world, and using the localization to reduce that transport cost, to reduce that carbon footprint. This is what we want to do. And as I said, we have 3 sovereign funds, and I can tell you we'll have more to come. So from a company of 4 years, that is only 4 years, having so many interests from government, is that food security is a real issue. And every single government are receiving us because they understand that we are coming in to solve the problem that they have.
Stefan, actually expanding on other countries like African countries, actually one of my clients has invested in the largest aquaculture facilities in the country, and they've asked a question for you. Nigeria's poised to become the second most populous country in the world. It will actually surpass China at the turn of the century. But what they highlight is that forex shortages, import is becoming out of reach, and that salmon in a lot of ways is for the rich. Catfish and tilapia are more efficient ways to address those protein deficiencies. Do you see this play being mostly about salmon, or what other fish can be useful for poor countries where there is protein deficiency, but salmon may be a little bit out of reach for much of the population?
So first of all, I completely agree with what the person from Nigeria just stated. And just to tell you a little secret, at Sonny Dangote, which is the brother of the richest man in Nigeria, that was in my house for a few days. We were looking to do a plant in Nigeria for catfish or salmon, and I decided not to do it there. Why? Because I told Sonny, so you are one of the richest family in Nigeria, but you have a problem of what? You have a problem of electricity. Their energy cost is extremely high. His house is running on generator. I said, until you solve that issue, I will not be able to have a facility in Nigeria. But what I can do is install a facility in Lesotho, and from Lesotho, we will ship, and which costs less than 40 cents, we will ship our salmon into Nigeria. So Nigeria will receive pure salmon. Now, to solve the problem of the food security of Nigeria, for sure, salmon is only one species. You can do other species. I looked at catfish. Through inland fish farming, you could do catfish, but you cannot do it in Nigeria because the cost of electricity and the quality of electricity is very poor. So we are not magicians. We need, and that's why using Abu Dhabi for energy is very important. France, Japan, US, no problem. Brunei, not an issue. Nigeria is an issue. Until they solve their energy and stability of electricity, we will not be able to use that technology there.
So infrastructure is critical to the food security story, and does also, again, pose potential concerns for these countries. But the UAE has stepped up to play a notable role in global efforts to curb hunger, ensuring sustainable food security around the world, strengthening collaboration towards more efficient supply chains. And UAE Minister of State for Food and Water Security spoke at World Food Day in 2020, supporting all of these initiatives. James, how do you see companies in the UAE, agri and aquaculture sector continuing to support addressing the UN Sustainable Development Goal of ending world hunger? I think that's by 2050 or 2035.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it all on Catalyst Partners to solve that one, but we've got a role to play within that, I suppose. Look, I think being here has been a real eye-opener in what's been an interesting few years, coming from the UK with Brexit and what looked like most countries looking more inwardly than outwardly, and especially with COVID-19 in the year we've had, countries very much trying to look after their own rather than looking to cooperate. And what I've seen over the last 2 years, and especially the last 9 months, is a country that's very focused on cooperation and very focused on trying to do the right thing. The Abraham Accord is a good example of that. The technology that comes out of Israel for agri and for food tech is huge, and being able to partner with firms in Israel with what's going on here enables that cooperation. And what we can do as a catalyst for the ADGM is look at companies that are, first of all, sustainable and have sensible businesses to grow and are going to make us money. But if there's a food security angle and there's a cooperation angle, such as with Pure Salmon and Lesotho, and what we can do in terms of exporting and being a net exporter, then that's absolutely something we should look to support.
A question from the audience, actually, on while we're on this subject, is what the kind of investment structures you're using in ag tech and food security related businesses, and what incentives you're offering to attract those businesses to Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on it very, very briefly. I mean, it's a good question. You can look at corporates and fund structures, and we've seen both and the benefits and problems with both structures. We're seeing more corporate structures than fund structures, but fund structures work very, very well, especially for things like Pure Salmon, where there's a very open-ended view of growing multiple funds in multiple jurisdictions. In terms of incentives, look, we're a commercial organization. To grow the ADGM, ADIO can speak a lot more about the incentive programs that they have in place, and I'm sure our colleagues in ADIO would be willing to jump on the phone and talk to those about it. There are a lot of incentive programs for the right businesses that are looking to come to Abu Dhabi and looking to grow here in a meaningful way.
And Dan, I mean, we talked a lot about impact and the impact that these kind of investments are having. What is your broader view on impact and investments aiming to do good for societies in which they operate?
Impact's the ultimate measure for me. I put some of my significant amount of my own capital to work in a recyclable capital impact fund long before ESG was a term in 2007, when I was still involved in the buy side directly as an actor. Impact is the ultimate measure on doing good. So it doesn't matter how much time I spend helping our clients build a methodology to transpose how they talk about their ESG policies as a GP or even an LP through that chain. Ultimately, real impact, and whatever that may be, is what we should all hold ourselves to. Having a positive impact where we can. Food surety surely has to be incredibly high up that global agenda. Keeping our planet in one piece certainly is there, but feeding the people on our planet, for me, certainly should come before that. And how we answer that in as an investment community is going to be incredibly important. It is a lot of this ultimately falls to us as the apparatus to answer some of these questions, and it's a wonderfully refreshing change operating today as a senior ESG actor than as a younger portfolio manager trying to have some impact as to how much impact our small percentage of the world can have. You know, we are, as buy-side people, investment professionals, a very small part of the global population has the tools and the apparatus to have a very significant impact across everything, but certainly here, certainly in food surety and global hunger, we have more tools at our disposal to end that than anybody else, I would say, bar governments directly themselves.
So, James, if we could maybe touch upon the risks of investing in this asset class. Again, I'm sure that before deciding to work with ADEF, you must have looked at numerous other similar opportunities. What are some of the risks that you highlighted and that were part of your analysis in deciding how to invest in fishing on land and farming in the desert?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, there's lots of risks to consider. I mean, we've touched on a few of them already. Energy sources and energy security is absolutely vital. There's a lot of construction risk in these operations. The obvious one, without stating the obvious, is, in agri or aqua, you're dealing with living things, and they don't grow, and the economics don't grow in a linear way like tech stocks do or tech companies do. You're dealing with something that is alive, that changes, that reacts in different ways to different things. And so when you're modeling this out, it's easy to take a normal banking model hat, and you've got to just constantly remind yourself that you're dealing with a living, breathing thing here. Offtake agreements, from what I've seen from the outset, and Stefan can talk about it more, is this is a pretty closed network that's been around for a long time. Breaking some of those offtake agreements and those networks is absolutely key, and getting that agreed with unproven technology in a lot of instances is something that needs to be taken into account. The last one for here, and this is a tricky one to solve for, is international experience. Most of the big agri businesses have come out of Australia, the US, maybe the Netherlands to a certain extent. And how you apply that international experience to a new region like this, where it's unknown and you're dealing with lots of unknowns, is tricky. But I think the way that businesses can succeed in that is applying that local global knowledge. Apply what you do in other regions to a region here, is how you can mitigate that to a certain extent.
And James, quickly, taking another question from the audience, from Tariq Barre. He's asked about poultry and poultry plans in the UAE addressing the massive gap between supply and demand, which he says is over 90%. Is that also part of the strategy and agenda?
It's come up a lot. There's another number of institutions within the region looking at livestock more generally. And I know up in Al Ain, there's a lot of interesting work going on of farms there. It hasn't come on our agenda yet, but happy to look at opportunities if they exist.
Stefan, a question from the audience. Given that you're building plants in France, Japan, USA is discussed, and are also vertically integrating, how do you develop a skill set to break into the sales channels for your product?
So, very good questions. I think everything goes down into the people. I have hired, and maybe I will share another slide. I have hired people from the space. So let's go. Okay, so Xavier Gauvard, just give you an example. Xavier Gauvard was the CEO of La Berry. La Berry is the biggest processor of smoked salmon in the world. I brought him on board. We are a vertically integrated business. I brought Xavier that took La Berry from 30 million to over $1 billion sales to be our chairman non-executive. And Xavier definitely is bringing know-how, talent, and also people into organizations. We bought EOD, which is the processor that already had with Carrefour, Auchan, Leclerc relationship. And today we already having relationship. In Japan, I signed an off-take agreement with Itoshu. Itoshu being the biggest importer of food that represent brand like Del Monte, Nutella, Nescafé, Nestlé, and others. So we are arriving and tapping directly to the best in kind because of that supply and demand issue. There is more demand, not enough supply. We are doing quality. And if you look at China, we already, before launching our phones, have off-take agreement for more than 100,000 tons. Again, talking to SOEs. As you said, it's food security an issue. So our vision is, and our plan is about risk. And we talk about risk, I want 6 risk awards. Everything we do is around risk. And I think that's why James and the other, and my other investor looked at me and say, okay, you are from the banking industry, why are you going to do salmon? I said, I know to manage process, and I know how to look at risk. And we really manage. I took with me my ex-executive committee from Corinne Martin and Gerard. I hired on the space of the pure salmon today, we have already 76 people working into our space, from 30 people on the growing side. And I took David Cale, that used to work for Moe and was in charge of their organization in Scotland, and after worked for another company in Australia. We took top management also from Unilever, and on the construction side, I took people from Suez, and today I have over 11 engineers that work for me. So our business is a very process-oriented business, like every industry. And the best things is always hiring the best people. As you can know, if you hire the best people, you have a good business. You can have the best business in the world, but if your team is weak, you will go down. I like to hire top talents, and I think our team is comprised of a lot of talents. And James, being on our board, is overseeing any hire that I do above a certain price. And I'm very pleased that our board are participating into hiring of the top talent that we're putting in our company. So we have already off-take agreements before we start opening a facility. At the moment in Abu Dhabi, we are visiting the Carrefour, Lulu's, and others, and hotels and restaurants to have off-take agreement before doing that. Same thing for Israel, same thing for other countries. But as I say, in China, 100,000 tons, I have over 100,000 tons of off-take agreement before breaking the floor of one of our facilities.
Another interesting question from Ravi Khoury. He's asked how you can explain or how you can maintain food security and food access other than by building food production locally. I think I'll throw this one to James. For example, when there's a crisis and importing food might be curtailed at the source, what are some of the other strategies that have been deployed besides completely building domestic production to try to ensure food security?
Yeah, I think it comes back down to cooperation agreements, looking to make sure that there is corridors to cooperate with the right people and keep those supply chains open. We're also interested on our side in shipping and airlines. And it was interesting to look during coronavirus, 90% of airline travel is tourism, 10% is cargo, whereas shipping is the other way around. So the shipping industry's not really been impacted by coronavirus. And if you can maintain fleets and you can maintain trade corridors, then that will keep your food security pretty high on the agenda. But it comes right down to cooperation. And then the last thing is thinking about the things outside the box. And so what's the next things, what are the crazy ideas we should look at in the future, and how do we solve some of those crazy ideas in the future. I thought we had some good ideas that we've seen over the last 2 years. But yesterday I saw on LinkedIn a post about farming in space, and how that's going to be the next growth market. And on the face of it, you think, well, that's crazy. Then you look at the UAE space program and some of the other things going on with SpaceX and what they did yesterday, and you think this is all possible and it's all up for grabs, and we should look at every angle, and we should look at every angle seriously.
Another question for Stefan, coming from the audience is, according to BAML research, there are a lot of salmon aquaculture plants already under development or currently under development. How real are some of these other projects that are making these headlines? And do you see any risk of potential oversupply?
So first of all, we talked also at a conference organized by the Bank of America. The point here is very simple. I think a lot of those projects have not raised assets yet. So if you look at people that raise over $300 million today, there's only 2 groups in the world that have done so. Okay, and one of those 2 groups. So there is and I'm very pleased of being followed in our vision. I think people are trying to do also 1 or 2 facilities. Our goal is to do 16 facilities and to be global, but you need to have that team. So I have 4 years in advance compared to most of them. I have my team, I have my process, I've already designed our processing facility and have a training center. A lot of them of those are maybe 2-man shows, and I wish them good luck. I think the market is humongous, and again, the supply and demand, the problem is supply and not demand. As I said in one of the previous slides, by 2030, there is a need of 33 million tons of fish, not only salmon, but 33 million tons. I think, to be quite honest, if you look at other planning, a plan that could be out is for, I would say, 500,000 tons. It's still not going to make a dent to the demand of protein that can happen. If tomorrow production of salmon go from 0.9% to 1.8%, we need to create 4.5 million tons. We are very far away from that. And I think we've seen through all those different keto diets or less eating meat, and we've seen even in the GCC, where today the problem in the GCC is the high level of cholesterol, where hospitals now in Saudi are obligated to serve 3 times a week fish. So there is not only a question of food security, but health security. And eating fish is way healthier than eating meat. So I think we have a lot of nice day in front of us. I wish my competitor good luck, but I don't think there is too many that has a team of over 100 people starting from day one and having the support that we have today.
So we're actually out of time. I'm so sorry for every audience member that we haven't been able to get to. But there is one more question that I think is really interesting that I'd like to touch upon with Stefan, if you don't mind. When you're shopping for fish, when you're buying fish, provenance is a consideration, and it weighs heavily into price. Wild caught salmon, which country it's from, with farmed salmon and potentially Emirati salmon, will that be positioned as an inferior product? How can branding play into your strategy, and how can aquaculture salmon be branded as so that it's not discounted relative to other products, and can it even be positioned as a premium product?
So yes, the positioning for us is premium. It's premium for many different reasons. First, our fish already in our first facility that is working in Poland is ASC. So ASC already has a premium, because if you look at salmon, only 50% of fish are ASC. We are also local, which means fresher. So for a fish to go from Norway to Abu Dhabi, it will take between 3 to 5 days. I'm super fresh. I'm also having no antibiotics, no chemical, no microplastics. And this is something that people want. So the fashion into not only the salmon industry, but into the food industry is being local. Everybody wants to eat things that are being farmed or harvested next to their house. We are right now in negotiation and discussions for a 10,000 ton plant in France. We are negotiating price, which are price between ASC and bio. If you look at the product now of RAS that are sold in America, they are sold at 50% more than salmon coming from Norway. So the question of, is it going to be a discount? No, it's going to be a premium. It is a better fish. We can do also pre-rigor, which means pre-rigor mortem is you can harvest the fish and you have 2 hours to prepare the fish, and the texture of it is extra fresh. So we have many different things. We are doing a branded product, and that's why I shoot a couple of the pictures of product that we do. These products are premium. We are going to sell a fish which is unconditionally fresher because we are local. Again, no antibiotics, no chemical, and which is something I think what people are looking for.
I think with the awareness of food fraud, which is my opening point as well, Stefan, right? You've got a significantly greater awareness of that. I think there's an Oceania study, 50% of US fish labeled incorrectly or something, a horribly high number. So it's easier to identify with the right science and partners, surety what you're buying is what you're getting. That drives a premium product and solves that problem almost up front.
And in Japan, as I said, Itoshu came and acquired the full 10,000 ton before I opened my farm. Why? Because they wanted to have a product from Japan to Japanese people. That's it. Locally produced is a trend that is here to stay, and we are answering that issue.
Well, on that point, I think it's actually time for us to wrap up. This has been such an interesting discussion. Again, I apologize to everyone in the audience that I was unable to address all of your questions. There's so many great questions that came through, and it's just such an engaging session. Again, thank you so much to our speakers. James, Dan, Stefan, this was really interesting. For those of you who are joining us after the fact on YouTube, please again like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and sign up at aimsummit.com to receive invitations to the live session so you can participate in the live Q&A. Our next session is going to be taking next Monday, 23rd November at 4 p.m. Gulf Standard Time, 1 p.m. Central European Time, and it's going to be focused on family offices, particularly on co-investment strategies. This session is going to be sponsored by Growmore Group and led by the chairman and chief investment officer of Growmore Group, as well as Mark Stolesen, the chief executive officer of Legatum here in Dubai. So we're really looking forward to hosting you all for that session. Please join us. Again, thank you so much for participating in this discussion. We talked about food security. We talked about the agricultural revolution, why food security has become a relevant topic. It was a relevant topic before COVID-19, but why it's become such a relevant topic today. We talked about how food security is taking a role in the UAE, and the UAE is potentially positioned to become a net exporter of food. And within a couple of years, is going to be a net exporter of salmon, which is incredible to really think about. We talked about the global cooperation that's been necessary. We also highlighted some of the risks in this strategy and why investors should be very careful in terms of how they deploy capital into this space. While the rewards can be very promising, there are certain risks that need to be addressed, that need to be managed, and that also make it very difficult to invest in these types of projects everywhere. Again, thank you all so much for being part of this webinar. Thank you to the audience for joining us, and thank you to everyone for being on the panel.